The lawyer's polished shoes clicked against the wooden porch as he unrolled the documents with practiced precision. Behind him stood three men in expensive suits, their faces wearing expressions that mixed arrogance with certainty. They had come to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs, or at least what they could take through legal manipulation and intimidation. Eleanor Hartman sat in her rocking chair, her weathered hands folded calmly in her lap. At 72, she had seen many storms roll across these plains, both literal and figurative. The ranch stretched out behind her, 500 acres of land that had been in her family for 4 generations. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pastures where her cattle grazed peacefully, unaware of the battle being waged for their home. The lead lawyer cleared his throat importantly. "Mrs. Hartman, as we've explained in our letters, your late husband signed documents that make the ownership of this property unclear. Our clients have a legitimate claim and we're prepared to take this to court. However, we're offering you a generous settlement to vacate the premises within 30 days. Eleanor's eyes, still sharp despite her years, moved slowly from one face to another. She had seen men like these before. Different faces, different decades, but the same hunger. The same assumption that an old woman alone would crumble under pressure. A slight smile touched her lips. "Men like you have tried before," she said softly. The youngest of the businessmen, a man barely 30 with slicked back hair, scoffed. "This isn't 1950, ma'am. We have lawyers, documents, and resources you can't even imagine. This ranch will be ours one way or another." Eleanor stood slowly, her movements deliberate. She walked to the porch railing and gazed out at her land. "Let me tell you about the last men who tried to take this ranch," she began, her voice carrying the weight of memory. "It was 1987. My husband had just died, and I was left with 3 young children and debts I didn't know existed. A development company came with papers, with promises, with threats. They said a woman couldn't run a ranch alone. They said I'd lose everything anyway, so why not take their offer?" She turned back to face them. "I was 33 years old and terrified. But my youngest daughter, she was only 6, and she looked up at me one morning and asked if we were really going to leave. Something in her eyes broke something in me, or maybe it fixed something. I realized that fear was just another kind of fence, and I'd been building it around myself." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Hartman, this is all very touching, but it has no bearing on the legal. I went to the county courthouse," Eleanor continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "Spent 3 weeks going through every record, every deed, every document filed since 1889 when my great-grandfather first claimed this land. Found out those developers had forged my husband's signature on their papers. They went to prison." The men exchanged glances. The confident smirks had faded slightly. "Then in 2001, Eleanor went on, an energy company wanted to run a pipeline straight through my north pasture. Offered me money, offered me royalties, told me I was being selfish keeping them from progress. When I refused, they tried to use eminent domain, fought them for 4 years. Turned out their environmental impact studies were fabricated. Project got canceled." She walked closer to the men, and despite her small stature, they unconsciously stepped back. "And in 2014, my own nephew tried to have me declared incompetent so he could claim the ranch through a twisted interpretation of my husband's will. He brought doctors, he brought witnesses who lied about my mental state. But my children stood beside me, and the community that I'd spent decades supporting stood with us. The judge threw out the case, and my nephew left town in shame." Eleanor's smile widened, but her eyes remained hard as flint. "So when you stand on my porch and tell me that men with money and lawyers are going to take my home, forgive me if I'm not impressed. I've buried better men than you'll ever be, and I've defeated worse ones too." She pulled a phone from her pocket, an unexpectedly modern gesture. "My granddaughter is a lawyer now. She's been expecting your visit. In fact, she has already filed a countersuit for harassment, and she has found some interesting discrepancies in your claimed documents. Turns out the signature you're relying on belongs to a James Hartman who died in 1943. Not my husband James Jr." The color drained from the lead lawyer's face. "Now," Eleanor said, her voice returning to that deceptively gentle tone, "you have about 5 minutes to get off my property before I call Sheriff Morrison. He's been my neighbor for 40 years, And he doesn't take kindly to people who threaten old women. The men retreated to their car with considerably less confidence than they'd arrived with. As they drove away, dust rising behind their expensive vehicle, Eleanor's daughter emerged from the house. "You think they'll be back, Mom?" Eleanor settled back into her rocking chair. "Maybe, but I'll be here." She looked at her daughter with eyes full of quiet strength. "And so will you." That's what they never understand. This isn't just land, it's legacy. And legacy doesn't surrender. The morning sun climbed higher, and the ranch continued its eternal rhythm, undefeated once again.